recording. Okay, so welcome everyone to Gannick's final webinar that's going to be given by Karen Nowosad. I'm sorry if I didn't say your name right, Karen.
Perfect.
Yeah, Karen is also a adjunct professor, so she knows that one version of hell is that you have to take roll call and get everyone's names wrong, right? And so I think that that's what my fate is going to be after death. But welcome here on 9/12. I was just saying to Karen, I just gave a tour today, and this is actually the only time of the year I prefer to give tours, because for me, 9/11 was the day that we were all brought to our knees. 9/12 is when we stood up together. And I don't want to get into politics, but I really did actually enjoy President Bush's speech yesterday. I found it very moving, actually, and reminded me that sometimes we have our differences with people, but on that day, we all really did come together. And so I'm really pleased that you all came and joined us. And Karen is going to be talking about Broadway's response to 9/11. And I'm going to mute myself and hand everything over to Karen.
Thank you, Kevin. That was a very fine introduction. You really capsulized a lot of what I was thinking as well. I am pleased to be able to give this presentation for a number of reasons. I had a strong affiliation with the World Trade Center area. I used to do a lot of consulting work there when I was still working in the training and performance field. And one of my major clients was in the World Financial Center, and that was the American Express Company. I was on a very large training project for them. I did my last day of training for them on 9/10, and I left that area at 4 o'clock, or actually the 4:01 ferry, honestly, never to return to do business there. And it was a fun area to work in. So many wonderful advantages working down there. I miss it. However, life has a strange way of bringing you around full circle. After that happened, my own business kind of chugged to a halt for a couple of years, but I regained myself, but I started to look at other opportunities, which in a very broad sense brought me around to where I am today. I'm very proud to be a part of the Guide Association of New York City. They have been a lifeline for me during this time period. I have a small business that I am launching called Broadway Neighborhood Tours, and that's why I focused on this. I went back and did some research, and I remembered how Broadway really responded to the ability to be able to get up. And as Kevin said, 9/12 was the day that New York kind of got up on their feet and started moving forward. So this is in commemoration. This is in thanks to all the people that were involved in this. I'm going to switch over now to a slide presentation that I have. This is going to guide you through what we want to cover today. I called this How Broadway Responded to 9/11. And you will find that we're going to kind of set this up as if we were doing some sort of a play or a musical. I have a little prologue that I want to do first, and then we'll have 4 different scenes that will take you through a number of years, not just now and not just back then, but we're going to go back a few years and take a look at what happened. So basically, right before 9/11 occurred, Broadway was having a tremendous season. They were doing very, very well. The year before, and of course, the Broadway years kind of go from the May of, or actually June area to the next June. So they kind of base their years around when the Tony nominations can come in. So the year before, they had attendance of around 11.9 million people. And the 2000 to 2001 season brought in something like $666 million. And when we think of Broadway, Broadway is more than shows going on. It is really the #1 tourist attraction in New York City. So the summer of 2001 looked very promising, even better than the year before had been. And there were a couple of reasons why that happened. Well, one of the first reasons was the fact that they had a brand new show that had opened in the spring right before, which was The Producers. And if you think back to that time period, The Producers was like the Hamilton of the day. They were making money hand over fist. You could not get a ticket. They had the audacity to be the first group to start to ask for $100 a ticket. Now we look at $100 a ticket now, and it's a little more commonplace. Back in 2001, that was a big deal, but they sold out. In fact, it got so bad that scalpers were going between $500 and $1,000 a ticket. People wanted to get in and see that show. When the Tony Awards came, they broke all kinds of records with awards that they had won. And as a result, the two leads, Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, the time period that they were scheduled to be in the show, it got completely sold out. So this was very promising for Broadway, not just for the sales, but it also started to move Broadway back into the real pop culture of the time. Now, they also had waiting on the horizon another show that was going to come over from London, and that was Mamma Mia. Incidentally, let me bring you backwards one moment. The Producers was over at the very legendary theater, the St. James. And if you know where that is located, you're down the street from Sardi's, you're across the street from Phantom of the Opera. It's just a phenomenal location. It's a very historic theater too. So when you come up to the Winter Garden, you're into a little broader area. And Mamma Mia was scheduled to go in there. Again, their pre-sales just broke all kinds of records. They were probably looking at, let me get my numbers straight here. They were looking at about $20 million in advance sales. So Broadway had a lot to look forward to. And on the Sunday before 9/11 occurred, which would have been the 9th, they put together a show that went out into Times Square. It was a free show. It was called Broadway on Broadway. And people used to gather to see this show, and they had good crowds. There was excitement everywhere you went. I'm going to play for you a little something that will get you in the mood, hopefully in the mood. I'm going to run for you just a little brief segment of one of the top acts. It was actually the first one they ran, Broadway on Broadway 2001. It was a scene from Chicago. And Chicago had only been open about 5 years at that point, the current version that we have running. Bebe Neuwirth had been one of the originals. She came back in to do this Broadway on Broadway. And for those of you who might be Bebe fans, you will recall that she had been part of the Frasier series. One of my favorite characters, Lilith. So she was doing quite well at this point, but Broadway has always been a part of her background. So let's take a look at a short scene. I'm not going to run the whole thing, but you can get an idea of the crowd and the interest that was there with Broadway at this time period. Okay. Now, as per usual, the thing has moved. So let me just take a moment. There it is. Okay. Zoom has a habit of doing that. And here it is. Okay, and you're going to hear the sound right through your device.
Days was when we paint the town and all that jazz. I'm gonna bruise my knees and roll my stockings down and all that jazz. Start the car, I know a whoopee spot where the gin is cold but the piano's hot. It's just a noisy hall where there's a nightly brawl and all that jazz. Slick your hair and wear your buckled shoes and all that jazz. I hear that Father Dip is gonna blow the blues and all that jazz. Hold on, hon, we're gonna bunny hug. I put aspirin down in your 90s rug in case you shake apart and want a brand new start to do that jazz. Oh, you're gonna see us, we must really shake and all that jazz.
Okay, so we will leave BB at this point, although it's always fun to listen to that. That's one of my favorite songs, the Kander and Ebb composers, a fabulous song to hear. It just kind of epitomizes what we think of when we think of Broadway at times. The Fosse choreography, it's fabulous. So it was a glorious day that day. The weather was nice. Everybody was having a great time. Monday, of course, was a little more of a traditionally closed day for Broadway. Now we have more shows that kind of rotate between days off and things that are going on. But back then, there was a little bit more of a Monday was the closed day. So Tuesday was the day that most, if not all, the shows reopened. And in the morning, hang on just a moment here. Okay. In the morning, of course, no one really knew what to think and what to do. So towards 11 o'clock-ish, I think we could say, we had the decision made to close the shows that night. There was no understanding at that point of what would happen. People were on edge. It was a terribly sad day too. So Broadway shut down. So at that point, they didn't know what to do. The producers, the main houses, they kind of shook themselves and said, we don't know how to proceed. The original thought was they were going to stay closed down for a while. Well, the next day, a phone call went out and some of the major people involved in Broadway, from the Broadway League, from the major producing houses, Schubert, Jacquemin, etc., they were called to a meeting down at this building, the Police Training Academy, which was on West 20th Street at that point. And one of the people who really called for action to take place was then Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Now, at the time, he had been reading Roy Jenkins' new biography of Winston Churchill. And something that stuck in his mind was a policy that Winston Churchill put into effect when the Battle of Britain was going on and London was being bombed so treacherously. Churchill called for the ballet, orchestra, theaters, everything to remain open. And he did that to try to show the Germans that some sort of normalcy was prevailing. So that was in the back of the mayor's mind as he came to this meeting. The first thing he asked about was, of course, when can the stock market reopen? Well, with the market being right downtown where all the destruction had been laid, it was a little more difficult. So they eventually did open that next week. But he turned to Broadway and he said, when can we get up and running? They hesitated. Eventually, it came out that he wanted to see them come back on the next day, which would have been the 13th. Well, not too much was said at that point. They said, well, this isn't going to be as easy as he thinks it's going to be. So they proceeded to move uptown to the offices at the Broadway League. And they met to determine what could be done. Could they actually get things up and running that Thursday night? Well, of course, one of the big problems was that many people who worked either the shows or the people that were part of the staff, the crews, many of them lived outside of Manhattan, and the bridges and tunnels were shut down at that point. So they said, how are we going to get the people in to do these shows? So a plan was hatched. Giuliani came up and said, if they can show their union card and where they work, they will have ability to get through the police blockades. So that's how they made the plan. But the big focus, believe it or not, was on New Jersey, because that's where a lot of these people lived. So a lot had to be done to kind of bridge the gap so that people could come through. But there was a second problem. The problem was the people that were in the shows. There were people who had lost relatives, spouses, friends. They were not feeling very positive about being able to stand up and give a performance. There were also issues about some of the things that were in different shows. And they had to evaluate, could certain shows run? Now, for example, we're going to listen in a couple minutes to a video that was filmed on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And you're going to hear from people from two of the major shows of the time, the producers and Urinetown. You're also going to see the person who was in charge of the Broadway League at that time. What they decided to do was bring everybody in, go through the show and see if there was anything that had to be revised. For example, the producers, their big number at the end, Springtime for Hitler, had the sound of bombs dropping. They pulled that out. They did not think that that would work well. It was not appropriate, so they pulled out those sounds. Eventually, when things were better, they did put them in. But Urinetown, which was getting ready to open that day, pushed back their opening. They took out things and made revisions that they never changed. So rather than me talking about this, I'm going to play for you the actual actors. They can explain it a lot better than I can. You're going to know a couple of these people with no question. Let's take a look at how this was handled.
I know as an actor, as a New Yorker, it allowed me to also work through all of that, sharing that with an audience. It was a very special time.
We didn't know if we would have an audience. We didn't know how they would react to a comedy, a dark comedy.
We were very curious about whether anybody would show up, for those that did come, what would it even be like, you know? I mean, how would people react? Would they laugh? Would they clap?
Our producers pushed our opening night back by a week. I think we opened the next Thursday night. But that Thursday, the night that we all went back to work, we actually had to make a couple of small changes in the script because it didn't feel appropriate at all. And those changes never went back into the show.
There were several bomb explosions and gunfire in the Springtime for Hitler number that we took out, I believe, for that first week back. There may have been a couple other tweaks throughout, just, you know, often I'm no fan of changing anything for any other reason because a piece is what it is. But boy, it was important to do that at that point. People didn't need to hear those sounds.
I can't even describe it. It was unusual and sad and sort of strange to be going back to work. Our director, John Rando, gave a curtain speech before the show, which was very moving. We had about a half a house, I would say.
So at the curtain call, as opposed to singing the goodbye song that we would sing every night, we sang God Bless America. And it was just as overwhelming emotionally as you would think it would be. And yet, again, never had I sung that song with such conviction and such understanding of what it meant or what it meant to me.
Certainly, some of the curtain speeches and the rendition of God Bless America were very inspiring. Even the most cynical amongst us who think that patriotism stuff is a little on the cheesy side couldn't help but be moved.
You know, they're in a hotel room in Sorrento. TV's totally in all different foreign languages, but there's CNN in English, and there my mother sees footage of that curtain call that night when we sang God Bless America and what that meant to her to be so far away and have some connection to what was going on here, much less to see her son on television. I can only imagine how crazy that was for her. But the fact that we were part of the face of New York getting back on its feet, New York rebuilding, and the fact that the producers was back on in this show that, you know, a lot of people outside of New York did know about. We were getting back to work. We were getting back to our lives, and we were going to be strong.
I guess it's that whole ensemble feeling that is part of theater that, you know, let me just jump in and try to make it better.
Well, September 11th was certainly another example of the show must go on. Broadway has always lived by that creed. I think for some people they had misgivings about that in the early stage because was it disrespectful? Was it inappropriate? Should the show go on?
The idea that we were going to go out there and try to share this, you know, 2.5 hours of silliness, of just kind of crazy with an audience who'd been so traumatized, we just weren't sure. That first night, people were screaming so loudly, I thought my hair was going to fly off my head. It was that energy of, I don't know what to do with my feelings, and in kind of a kooky way that the ending of the show where they just do song after song after song after song after song and people are up and screaming, it just gave them permission to release it, to get loud and scream and laugh and get up on their feet and dance. And I'd never seen that before, and I think that's when I truly realized the power of the theater and of music and of art, is that it allows people to release their feelings through other people.
I think that we were able to help in some way, and I have been told several times by people, strangers that I had never met, how important that evening at the theater was for them when they saw the producers soon after 9/11, and what it meant for them to be able to sit in the dark and laugh, because we weren't laughing.
Not only does theater and art in general give us permission to sort of enjoy our lives, I think it also gives us permission to hang on to our civilization.
All right. I think that you heard some very important points made there about what Broadway was able to do for New York City. In a sense, it was their contribution. I think for many of these artists, they started to realize how important their role was. I've heard some artists talk about the fact that they really questioned, what am I doing with all that's going on in the world with just, I'm out in a musical theater number or I'm acting. Well, there was some high value that they brought about. The ability to take people to another place for a time period gives a release to them, which is very, very essential. So it turned out that Broadway reopening had many healing effects for many people. It met the goal that the mayor was looking for. Now, let's talk about the first night that things opened. It was kind of funny in a way. I've been reading the Michael Riedel book where he talks about what happened during that time period. And he relates the fact that the first night back, Mayor Giuliani, some of the other people went up to the Lion King when it opened. But they had a good crowd, but not tremendous. The biggest crowd was over at the producers. People saw an opportunity to get in there and finally see that show. The press was in there in mass, and it just kind of turned out to be kind of comical. Now, the fact that each of the shows also ended with God Bless America was kind of significant as well. When you look back on that song, it was written by Irving Berlin. So, for example, down at the Allergist's Wife that was running, Valerie Harper used to get out and talk to the audience and describe some things for them, kind of try to make them comfortable with the fact that they were coming back to the theater, and then they could end with this beautiful tribute. Now, the first few shows, there were questions about, well, who is actually going to be in the audience? Well, there were a lot of people from the various air flights that had been grounded. They were able to come in and see the shows. They gave some tickets out to some of the first responders. So they tried to give tickets where they could for people that had been serving in some sort of capacity to try to help out. There were also people that were kind of left behind in not being able to travel out. And of course, New Yorkers that had an interest in being able to come in and be a part of this. So also, when things opened on the 13th, there was quite a police presence down in the area. The concern at that was that there could have been another attack on its way. And they did realize that that particular area, the Times Square area, that was listed in the top 10 as potential sites that could have been targets. So police presence was very much there. You can take a look at this picture. This is going in, I believe, to the producers. You can see in the back there, there's Nathan Lane kind of showing on the side. So people were coming in. And then as you get a little further up, closer to Times Square, you can see that the crowd is thinned out quite a bit, but people were going into Chicago. All the shows had some representation. So it was a difficult time period for those first couple of weeks. And at that point, Broadway kind of stepped up again to see what they could do to help out. So this one I'm calling Scene 2. In Scene 2, we take a look at the fact that they recognized that there was going to be a need to go a little bit broader to try to get people in. And you will recall the very famous commercial that was put together the I Love New York. It was part of the I Love New York campaign, but they used the very beautiful song, New York, New York. Now, this particular commercial kind of stands out as something that people really wanted to do. You notice right up in the front, because they were being so successful at this point, you'll see over to the right, Nathan Lane raising his arms and Matthew Broderick raising his. They were almost symbolic at that point. They came out in force. They came out in their costumes. Next to them, to the left, you have Elaine Stritch. She was not in the show at that point, but she wanted to be a part of this. Front and center, you have Bernadette Peters, also was not in a show at that point, but she deemed it important enough to come in and try to make a contribution as well. So they had tremendous participation. Interesting to note, this was all done through donations. Various unions donated their time. All the people that were performing and singing, they donated their time. So it was a real collaborative effort. Now, it took a while for things to come back and really start to move again. Some shows that were close to getting ready to close anyway got a little bit of an extended life. The unions kind of kicked in, or they cut back a little bit how much they were charging. Everybody worked to keep some of the shows going a little bit longer. So it was a time period where people were working together, helping to make Broadway work, and in turn, helping the city as well. One of the things that really impressed me about that time period was September normally is a month that sales start to dip. Once schools open, they traditionally have lower than in the summer. But as you get closer to the holidays, business picks up. And that's what happened that year. At the end of 2001, the week that Christmas was in, Christmas and New Year's, they did have a very substantial season. Now, of course, when January came, things were a little bleak. It took some months to come out of it. But the year that 9/11 occurred in came in lower than the year before, but not terribly so. So all in all, there was a lot of success and a lot of things, a lot of good things that came out of that. All right, we're going to stop at this point to see if there are any questions.
Looks like no questions, so maybe Karen, we can just proceed.
Okay, then we will move on. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to go to a little different look. We've seen the success and the ability to give back that took place, but now let's take a look at something that we heard in the video about how theater affects us. And this was a big question that I had as a theater goer. When were stories going to show up about 9/11? So let's look at the contribution now to the arts. And this is even going to go further than 9/11, a little bit further beyond. Okay. Let me stop sharing for just a moment. Let me close a couple things up here, if I may. Okay. Better. Okay, so we're going to come into what I call Act 3. And Act 3 is going to focus on shows that attempted to tell the story. One of the first shows that came about was down at a theater. It was located down on White Street. Let me just get my notes here to make sure. This was the Flea Theater, and it was about 4 blocks from Ground Zero. Now, they had a fairly good ability to open the doors, but they had a plan in place at the time. They were working off of a 5-year plan to try to develop this actual theater. When they came into the 5th year, 9/11 changed everything for them. So the problem, of course, was being able to get people down to be able to see the shows. So the Flea Theater decided that they would put together a production that had been presented to them that actually dealt with 9/11. And it was called The Guys. It was by Ann Nelson. Now, this was a story of a journalism professor who was helping a fire captain write eulogies for the men that he had lost. It opened in December. It starred Sigourney Weaver and Bill Murray. It was a difficult show to get people to, however, something worked well. They were able to run it for 14 months. They had a rotating cast. Now, their numbers indicate that over 14,000 people attended over the period of those months. And it remains the Flea Theater's one of their biggest works. They have since moved to another location, but this was a picture that was identified with them at that time. Now, a second show came about in the year 2002. It was run in the Acorn Theater, which is at Theater Row, the picture on the left, and that, of course, is West 42nd Street. And the show was titled Mercy Seat. This was an actual playbill that came from that show. Now, it was a play by Neil LaBute, and it was set on September 12th. The plot involved a man named Ben who worked at the World Trade Center, but was away from the office during the attack with his mistress, who is also coincidentally his boss. So they brought in some juice here. He anticipated that his family thought that he was killed in the tower's collapse. So he contemplates using the tragedy to run away and start a new life with his lover. And it brings up questions, of course, about human impulse, morality. This also starred Sigourney Weaver. Ben Brantley came down. He felt it was important enough for the New York Times to review this, and he gave a pretty good review on it. Now, that did not run as long as the Guys did. This only ran for a few months. So that was one attempt. Another attempt came in the season of 2003 for Playwrights Horizon. They're just a few doors down from Theater Row that we just saw. They ran a play that was called Recent Tragic Events. This is a scene from that play over on the right. It was written by Craig Wright, and it actually began Playwrights Horizon's season for 2003. It ran between September 5th and October 12th, but that's more the norm for Playwrights Horizon. They have a number of shows in their season. So that was the second one, or third one actually, that we had that ran. It was called Recent Tragic Events. This was a story. It's supposed to take place on 9/12. It follows a couple that were on a blind date the day after the towers fell, while the woman was trying to reach her sister in New York. So they focus on it, and then they go from there. Now, the next one also took place down at Theater Row, but this is moving up a number of years. The last one I just showed you was 2003. This was July 2011. I was invited to come in to review this show, and it was called The Shoemaker. The Shoemaker starred the phenomenal Danny Aiello. He was calling this the role of a lifetime. He was committed to this show, very, very dedicated. It had an unusual aura to it. It's hard to describe. In fact, I'm going to show the next picture just to give you a little better flair. The colors, the shadowing, that really exemplifies what this show did that really set it apart. The plot involved a man who had escaped the Holocaust, and he was a shoemaker. He was supposed to be working in Hell's Kitchen. And the morning of 9/11, before anything had happened, a woman comes into his shop and leaves a pair of her shoes for repair. She never comes back to get them. And he goes through really a self-evaluation and an examination of where he has been in his life and what is now taking place with this woman missing, how they all tied in together. This was a very committed show. I reviewed it very, very highly. I thought that it really had a lot of meat to it. But again, the feel that it captured, it's very hard to describe. It still is in my mind as one of the top shows that I have reviewed down at Theater Row. So that was 2011. And it was not until 2016 when Come From Away previewed out in Washington, D.C. It came into the Ford Theater. And when I first saw it advertised, I thought, a musical about 9/11? I thought, how the heck are they going to do that? Well, I followed the reviews and everything that was coming out of it down at the Ford Theater pretty closely. And within a few days, I said, there's something here. Of course, by the time I went in to get my ticket, it was completely sold out. They extended the run down at the Ford Theater. It was so successful. Now, the picture that you see here, I took when I went to see Come From Away. I made sure as soon as the tickets went on sale that I got in. I went the third day it was running in New York. It is a remarkable show. It's hard to describe how they were able to come up with the concept. Of course, they center it out in Ganders, where the planes that were landed could not leave, how the town took care of them, the whole Newfoundland area took care of people. But they do an interesting thing with the story. If you have not seen it yet, they managed to bring in personal relationships and what's happening in New York. And it kind of ends on a hopeful note too. The music is excellent. It's just a beautifully crafted show. The good news is this is going to be one of the ones that is reopening on Broadway. If you have not seen it, I would encourage you to go. It is just an absolutely remarkable show. So all of that kind of gives you an idea that this has not been an easy subject for theater to deal with. And at this point in time, Come From Away remains one of the shows that we can turn to and look at the whole experience, and we can gain a better understanding of how things occurred. Some of the other shows I did not put into this presentation. There are a few that are out in regional, some local theaters are doing them. But again, Come From Away, it tours also. It's a good example of what theater can do to really bring these difficult moments into sight. Our final scene is going to deal with the contribution that the Broadway, I'll call it the Broadway neighborhood, made to the actual cause of 9/11. And that involved the firehouse that is located as shown here on West 48th and 8th Avenue. We have Engine 54, Ladder 4, Battalion 9. They are called the pride of Midtown. And people have kind of nicknamed them the Broadway Firehouse. They were one of the first houses to respond to 9/11. They sent down 15 people. None of them came back. They are one of, I think they're the only fire department in the city that did not have anyone return. So unfortunately, they made a large contribution, probably the most difficult one of all. But there is a beautiful memorial. I didn't get some pictures of it, but you can see over here to the right, the relationship between their group, the 9/11 situation, and inside you have an actual wall that is dedicated to the people that were lost that day. So that brings us to our conclusion. One of the things that I like to emphasize is that Broadway is not just a group of shows or a group of theaters, it's also a neighborhood. And as a neighborhood, they work together to take care of their own and to take care of things that go on in the city. It's going to be interesting to watch how they are going to respond to back into play now that COVID is, they've made some decisions on how to handle COVID. A few of the shows have opened. I personally, because I also do reviews, I have been in to see a show. I saw one, an off-Broadway show. I saw it about a month and a half ago down at the Actors Temple. It was called Mandela. It was beautifully done. And I'm looking forward to getting back into my first Broadway show. I'm probably going to try for one of the big ones first. I'm debating on either Wicked or The Lion King. My absolute favorite show remains Phantom of the Opera. I will be in on that, but their contribution cannot be underestimated for what they did for the city post 9/11. So that concludes my presentation. Are there any last questions?
Well, thank you so much, Karen. That was great. Yeah, and if anybody does have questions, please do put them into chat. I can say that you jogged my memory in so many different ways. When I came back from graduate school, everybody wanted to, of course, do something for the rescue workers down at what then was being called Ground Zero. And I can remember that they had all of these celebrity and that were around Christmas time. This was around Christmas time that I came back into the city, and they were feeding them at these tents that were made up for all the rescue workers. And for some reason, I got to be in there, and none other than Baby Newirth was sitting there, like giving people mashed potatoes or something. But she's as beautiful and as slim as she looks on TV. So
wonderful, nice memory there. Thank you.
Other thing, like what you were saying, what jogged my memory, I was in Chicago. That's where I went to graduate school when 9/11 happened. And I remember for the few days, like everybody, especially around, university campus, like University of Chicago, everybody was just, this was all anybody was talking about. And it was overwhelming. And like you said, at a certain point, you just need some relief. So I went to the movies, and the movie that I watched was called In the Bedroom. I wanted a small sort of sleeper, and it stars Sissy Spacek and Tom Wilkinson. It was the perfect movie to watch because it's all about grief. And Sissy Spacek, if you haven't seen this, she loses her son to just a random murder he's dating this woman, and her ex-husband shoots him. And she's just consumed with rage in the sense of how unfair it all is. And I just remember being, one of maybe 4 people in this empty movie theater in the middle of Chicago. And everybody was just sobbing through the whole thing. And feeling,
it gave that opportunity to get some of the grief out.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we want out of art. And I saw Mercy Seat, and it definitely has a Neola roots. Yeah, it's that's sort of very misanthropic. I have to say, I find him a very misanthropic type But I agree with you. I also saw the Shoe Repairman. That was an amazing show. It had
Wasn't it?
it was really good.
I
Yeah.
just loved that show. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
thought it was going to move on, but it didn't. And maybe it was too soon. I don't know.
I like the fact that they kept it actually as a more intimate. For me, I like off-Broadway plays more than Broadway plays because I like that more intimate sort of feel of
Yes.
how, I guess I'm more of a Chekhovian type of theater goer, Beckett theater goer
Great.
than a big musical. But I do agree with you that Come From Away, I think, is a very moving. And the other thing that really moved me, like you said, is that I didn't realize that they did this, but at the end of every performance after 9/11, that they all sang the national anthem. I'm not, a knee-jerk patriot, but that's very moving to me.
Oh, they did the God Bless America.
Oh, God Bless
Yeah,
America. I'm sorry.
right,
Yeah.
right. That was, that they took that from Congress. They said, oh, that worked well up at Congress, so let's us give it a try.
Yeah.
Wouldn't hurt to be doing some of that right now. I don't know. Hard to tell what's going to work right now.
Yeah. It's amazing that attack from outside brought us all together, and here from the inside. You're right. I don't know what's going to do it, but hopefully there's something. It also was making me think, I think of myself primarily as a writer. There are very few works of literature since 9/11 that have been able to really capture.
Yep.
I think the best things have been movies like the United 93 movie. I think
Yes,
Spike
agree.
Lee's movie about the 25th hour was really moving.
yes.
I don't know maybe it's the visual element, but like Don DeLillo's Fallen Man, I think a lot of people found really wanting. It's it's such a hard subject to get your head around in a narrative type of structure. So something like that Shoe Repairman, I think that you can focus on that one character and the resonance of surviving something before, and the shoes. I think, this is something anybody who's been to one of these museums in Europe, Auschwitz or something like that, and you see these empty shoes.
Yes.
It's a very powerful symbol, right? And so it was
And I had forgotten till I reread a couple things on the Shoemaker. They did have voices off screen, off stage. They had two of them, but Danny was the only one, the only focus, and he was just amazing to see. And wasn't he something in person?
Yeah.
Great man, great
I
man.
I don't know him in anything else. I only know that particular character. I don't know a lot of actors and actresses. I don't follow their careers, but you're right. He made a deep, deep impression upon me.
Yeah, and he even met with people after the show at the performance I was at. He was that dedicated to the show.
Yeah.
But he's not with us anymore. If you ever get to see Moonstruck, you'll love him in that.
Oh, okay. He's in Moonstruck. Well, I've seen Moonstruck, of course. Yeah. So
Yeah, he plays the jilted lover.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
that's
saw the
Danny.
father figure just passed away as well.
Yes, he did. Yeah, right.
Well, thanks so much again. Does anybody else have any questions or any comments? Well, I do wish that we had been able to garner a larger audience. I've been saying this to other of our contributors to this particular. This is part of for those not in the know, but I think some of our other contributors, like Mel, I think is on this particular, he's an attendee, Mel Wasserman. I wish that this had reached a larger audience, but I think that there are a number of things that are happening around the city that are commemorating 9/11. And so it's stiff competition, but this was really great. And I'm so glad that you shared this with us, Karen. And we do have it recorded, so you can share it with other people, and hopefully they can benefit from seeing this as well. And yeah, so some people are saying thank you. And
Okay, wonderful. And thank you for having me. You have no idea how much this opportunity meant to me to get me back into the concept of let's get back into New York.
Yeah, well, we welcome you into the fold, and hopefully you're going to get lots of tours coming up, and
Thank you.
not just about this, but about Broadway in particular.
Great.
And like you said, the shows are starting to run. The ticket I wanted was Bruce Springsteen on Broadway, but they were too expensive. So maybe
Yes.
I'll see Come From Away again. I don't know.
Me too.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you all for coming. Bye now.